So Canada's Titanic. We're talking about the RMS Empress of Ireland, where RMS stands for the Royal Mail Ship. I also learned that they had a contract with Royal Mail in the UK, but it was also a contract with the United States Postal Service. And this particular ship, the Empress of Ireland, was built and launched in 1906. Owned by Canadian Pacific, and they did the service route between Canada and the UK. 170 meters long, 20 meters wide, and 11 meters deep. About 1,500 passengers in 4 classes, and about a crew of 300, just under 400. Speed of 18 knots. It had done 192 trips and carried about 150,000 passengers, about 100,000 in the westward direction, and about 50,000 going east. Mainly immigrants who are returning home to their family. Interestingly, Titanic was another 100 meters longer, another 300 feet, 330 feet longer than this one. So I never realized how big the Titanic was. I thought this one was big, but no, not compared to the Titanic. Now it's interesting. The Canadian Pacific also owned a bunch of other ships. I always think of Canadian Pacific as a railway in Canada. No, they were big in the ship. They had the Empress of India, Japan, Britain, all these other countries. And many of them actually, there were 3 different empresses of China. And as they bought them and sold them and renamed them, they gave them the different names. But it's fascinating for someone who thought of them as a train company to realize that they were really in shipping. There was different Canadian Pacific lines and Canadian Pacific steamships. They had different names along the way, and why we call it Canada's Titanic? Well, it left at 4:30 on the morning in Quebec, May 28th. Just a few hours into the trip. Most of the people hadn't been sleeping on the boat yet, or hadn't had a full night's sleep. And it left, and then it crashed into it. It saw this coal ship in the distance, miles away, 5 to 6 miles away. Then fog rolled in, and the Storstad rammed into its side, and it sunk within 14 minutes.
Whoa!
1,000 people, just over 1,012 people died. 465 survived. The death toll was less than the Titanic's 1,500, but the actual passenger death toll of 840 was more than the Titanic's 818. Titanic lost an awful lot of crew members, where the Empress of Ireland did not. On the boat, there were 167 Salvation Army staff and family members who were heading back to the UK for a World Congress, and only 8 of those 167 survived. So there's still a service held every year at the Salvation Army facility in Toronto, commemorating those who died.
How long did it take the Titanic to sink?
It was hours.
Yeah, so
they got a lot of lifeboats off.
Yeah,
it rammed in the side. The water just fell in, and then it listed, and 10 minutes. So 14 minutes total around. So they did have enough lifeboats. They just couldn't get them in the water fast enough. Interesting, this actually only occurred within 100 miles of a U.S. border. There's your main. It's about 100 miles from the crash, the sinking site to the main border there, Edmundston. But you can see how far it managed to go, a few hours that it did travel.
Yep, we had a crew.
In the aftermath, the Canadian inquiry concluded that the Storstad altered course and was responsible. Norwegian found the Empress was responsible for passing starboard to starboard. Apparently, the rule is you're supposed to pass port to port. And when they first saw each other, it looked like their lights and their code, they could do port to port, but somebody changed their mind. And eventually it led to the sinking. But weeks after, the CP hired a salvage company to recover the first class mail. There were 318 bags of mail, The
Wow.
purser is safe and about $150,000 worth at that time. Those silver bullion, it's about worth about 2 million now. It is sitting in only 40 meters. That's 120 feet, roughly 125 feet of water. At the time it sank, you could still see, or the cone, the top of the ship was just below the water level or near the water level.
Wow.
And so there's no, you certainly knew exactly where it was, not like the Titanic. And you could still access it. They had to get to the safe and the stuff. The salvage company had really massive explosions to get through the walls of the ship to the right area. And now those provided corridors for divers, and it has been looted by experienced divers. It's now, it wasn't until about 1997 or 2007. In the last 20 years, it became very significant. And in terms of salt, but there had been looting of artifacts from the ship. This was one letter from Margaret Greenaway. She was one of the survivors, and it's on the internet at this documentedcloud.org, and it's fascinating to read the story of actually what happened. She typed this letter to her mother and father shortly after she was rescued. They thought she was dead. They put her in a coal shed.
Mm.
But she wasn't dead, and she had just been married a week. She tells the story how she was separated from her husband. She thought he was dead, and he thought she was dead, but then they were reunited. This is a shipwreck cover retrieved from by divers from the CPL Empress, postmark Blair, Alberta, in 1914, on its way to London. And it's interesting that it was backstamped, and this is a real mystery why it was backstamped at the dead letter office on December 7th. It would suggest that it wasn't backstamped in the UK, so they never forwarded it to the UK. It's a bit of a mystery why it went to the DLO. And a second one, this one actually has the green stamp recovered by divers from Montreal to England, but there was no backstamp, so no indication of if it ever was forwarded. Of course, the stamps all soaked off, and you'll see this on other ship mail because of they're in water. The stamps all typically get sunk or removed. This one actually, here's the back of it. In 2014, Canada Post had their own commemorative issue. And of course, since you know that I collect varieties, well, this is the perforated stamp. And there's a horizontal gutter pair. So if you can get them with the gutter pair and canceled on a letter, that would be cool.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't collected very much modern stuff. It's also available in a die cut with peel and stick. There's also a souvenir sheet.
Yeah, it's a nice one. I have that one.
And as a variety on the souvenir sheet, there's a version from the uncut press pane. You can buy from Canada Post these uncut press panes with generally about 12 souvenir sheets on each. They're not very useful for collecting unless you want to use them on as wallpaper, but it hasn't got the barcode. That's what makes it separate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's nice.
Officially different. And these are the actual coordinates that I entered into Google to find that location on the map. And that's it. I'm still looking for more postcards and pictures of it. I did get this postcard of the Empress of Ireland with a GB stamp.